We're going to try and best the wind up here. So just a brief introduction to the panel. So in today's market, building a film and entertainment industry with social responsibility at its core is vital to long-term success. A creative economy that contributes positively to an inclusive future sets a baseline for innovation that can drive sustainable growth. With audiences increasingly demanding authentic, nuanced stories, and an industry workforce unafraid to challenge traditional operational practices, these conversations about how to reshape film industry business models to encompass social value are rapidly gaining momentum. And that's exactly what we're here to do today. We're examining how this can be achieved specifically through a lens of mental health. So I'd like to introduce my panelists. To my left, we have Noopur Agarwal. She's the Vice President of Social Impact at MTV Entertainment. And we have Alexandra Miles, founder of Project Blackbird and a mental health advocate. And just a brief sort of introduction to what Project Blackbird is and does, in case you missed the panel this morning. Alexandra has kindly brought a Project Blackbird video. If we can cue that up now.
Project Blackbird, our nonprofit organization, it features a screening of the film Blackbird. The film Blackbird is based on our own story to help everybody understand what lies beneath eating disorders, as well as help everyone understand the power of connection.
Eating disorder has the highest mortality rate than any mental health diagnosis. It is now second to the opioid crisis.
For me, what really drives me is once I was able to acknowledge my own eating disorder, I started looking around my community and I saw it everywhere I looked. I saw the disconnect between the pain that people were experiencing and how people were showing up to their lives, and that internal silent hurt that is so loud. So incredibly loud. I was living in a world where the eating disorder for me was a passive way to die because I didn't know how to live.
At a young age, I had to really create a very close internal relationship with myself because I was in my brain a lot. So I knew in my life that my relationship to myself is kind of the most important relationship. And I cannot actually have an external relationship unless my internal is at a place where I can give myself.
I think all of us just want to feel understood. I hope that somebody has the bravery to acknowledge what they're feeling and to say, maybe I've been struggling and maybe I don't have to, alone or at all. That we can just talk, that we can make it normal to say, I'm struggling. It's okay to not be okay, and it's vulnerable, it's scary, but it's incredibly powerful.
There's nothing more risky than authenticity and showing up to the world vulnerably.
We will be taking this tour to cities around the United States. We're going internationally as well. So to use the narrative film to engage these students as we go on tour, we're doing about 50 different college campuses this year. We take this event to conferences and organizations, and we're excited to see who our partners will be and who we'll be able to chat with down the road and who will be able to help, and the stories that we'll be able to hear too.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So I guess just to kick us off, I wanted to ask you both, what specifically led you to invest your time and your professional development into narratives that are specifically surrounding mental health?
I can kick us off. So at MTV Entertainment, we have a long history of activating on social issues. Specifically at MTV, we've activated on voting and sexual health. And about 16 or 17 years ago, we launched a mental health campaign because we could see the mental health rates, the challenges young people were facing were rising. As the years went on, unfortunately, those numbers didn't get better. So we looked at what was happening in our content, and there were a lot of stories about mental health coming up organically in our unscripted and scripted shows, and we could see the impact they were having on our audience members. So we started to think about how can we more intentionally harness this power, and how can we really shift the culture within our creative walls to be really mental health focused. And we started to kind of look at what the opportunities were. And for one, we realized we could start to be more proactive and think about not just what stories are coming up, but what stories do we want to tell? What haven't we seen or heard yet? Which communities haven't been represented? We also started to think about the nature of those stories. We found we were stuck in this idea of mental health as a binary. You either see mental illness on screen or wellness, but in reality, we all live on a continuum. How can we see that full range of mental health experiences? And we were also stuck in a mindset of mental health storytelling is about following a set of rules, like we can't say this or we can't do that. But in reality, we needed to shift to thinking about it as opportunities. This wasn't about following a rule book. It's like, what are the white spaces for storytelling that can make the stories richer and more relatable? So with that in mind, we kicked off in 2021 a coalition of over 70 partners, which includes many of our industry peers like Disney and Amazon Studios, along with a lot of the leading mental health expert organizations in the US, to start to come together and really shift the culture of our industry. And so far, what we're really proud to have accomplished is we built a resource called the Mental Health Media Guide, which is an online free resource for any type of storyteller to get best practices on how to tell these stories. And it's not rules, I promise. It's really about just thinking through the different elements of your story and simple tweaks or ideas you can add into your storytelling that can really add that richness and depth. So now that we're a few years in, and we'll talk about this more in a minute, we also have research to really look at the impact it's having. And that's where we're so excited because there's lots of new opportunity to explore. And I'm gonna show you what this content looks like on our airwaves. So MTV Entertainment consists of a number of brands, SHOWTIME, MTV, Comedy Central, and others. So in this video, you'll see some examples from recent projects. So can we get the MTV tape, please?
Four.
I feel so alone. I'm not appreciating life enough. I just feel like I'm better off gone.
Valuable. It be hard, but you ain't got to do it on your own.
Stories move people, and if we do it in the right way, stories can have a positive mental health impact.
Ever since that episode aired, tens of thousands of people searched for resources on our mental health site.
I love you.
The holistic presentation of people in these shows allows a broader range of people to see themselves.
When I was 18, I was diagnosed with bipolar and borderline personality disorder.
Teen Mom opened up this door for other people like me.
You okay, boo-boo?
I just need to go get my cell phone.
The more the entertainment industry can show these conversations happening, it's opening the doors for these discussions.
Breathe with me, okay? Breath is the only thing in the world right now.
It's really hard for us to visualize ourselves getting help in some way if you can't see someone that looks like you or that's been through similar life experiences going through it.
I don't even recognize the girl staring back at me.
It's up to you to reclaim that light inside you. Healing is a personal journey. You have to figure out what works best for you.
Blaming yourself, aren't you? I did that too. Still do some days.
What's so powerful about the stories that you've told here is that you're able to break past the stigma.
Can we just stop and acknowledge that we're all here together? Just be here, be present, breathe, gratitude.
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 Gratitude, gratitude, gratitude.
Gratitude.
It stands for seasonal affective disorder, which I experience every winter and fall, the end of summer too.
I believe that what you have is anxiety.
Anxiety?
Who hurt your brother?
My father. What will break this cycle?
It's important for this stuff to show up on television.
I need to self-actualize.
He's gonna empower himself!
It gives people the opportunity to know, okay, I'm not out here by myself.
Suffer from depression. It's a great way to start off a set, you know. Sorry to go blue right away, but it's true.
How do you stay so chill?
I just channel my anxiety into something more productive.
Hey, Grandma.
You okay?
Yeah.
Oh, Baba, you can't fool me.
You struggle with some pretty bad anxiety, don't you?
Yeah, you could say that.
As black men, we deal with levels of trauma that nobody deals with. Like, we never supposed to hurt.
So you're talking about changing the culture. Sometimes we gotta know when to say it's time to get help.
These issues can touch anyone. We want people to take action about what they're experiencing.
I'm sorry I wasn't there to save you.
It's okay, Ma. I learned how to save myself.
Storytelling can have a tremendous impact on people's desire to be fully seen and fully counted. And media has a powerful role in building a new type of connection in which we can do better for one another.
That's a great responsibility that none of us should take lightly.
Alexandra, do you want to jump in on that question?
Well, Noopur, very well said, and I think the video recapped very nicely these concepts and themes of the human experience and connection. And I guess I'll just add that what inspired me was very similar, but for me, of course, watching the video in the beginning, it came from lived experience to start, and recognizing the responsibility that I had to share my story, because how could somebody know that story if they had not lived it themselves? And I think it's all of our responsibility to champion our own stories, to share so that we can connect. And I do think there's a certain power of film, as mentioned in both videos, to evoke empathy and connection. And with connection, when you tell a story about being human, you are more connected. And we are all human. We all have brains. And the wonderful thing about being a human and having a brain is that it's complex enough and beautiful enough to struggle. And so you're going to form a stronger connection when you tell narratives and when you tell stories of characters that have human qualities. And as you said, it doesn't have to be necessarily be the center point of the film, of the storytelling, but it's a piece of the woven cloth for that individual. And if we can just weave that into our narratives, you're more connected. It can make a huge impact. So that was a little bit my experience, but well said.
It's interesting, I think, what you mentioned about narratives being able to open up a door to empathy. I don't know how many of you have seen in the UK, there was a show called Mr. Bates versus the Post Office about the post office scandal, and that has had direct impact on government inquiry and policy, and it's more in the news now than it had been when it was in the news, when the actual story was in the news. And so I think it's interesting to think about, you know, how does that impact side fit into what we're all here, you know, at the Marché to talk about, which is the financial side. And for you, how do you balance those two, sometimes viewed as opposing elements, even though they aren't really?
Yeah, I think it's a really great question, because sometimes the assumption is that it's a trade-off, but it doesn't have to be. We have this saying that one of our partners shared with us that now all my creative colleagues now say as well, is that every story is a mental health story. If characters in your story are experiencing emotions, they have feelings, they're going through challenges, that's a mental health story. So we're already telling these stories, and it's really about how do we tell them in a more nuanced way? And for us, what is really critical in making that case is research and data. Are we actually having an impact, first and foremost, on the issue, and then what is the commercial impact? So to that end, last week we launched 2 new research studies conducted by the University of Southern California's Annenberg School. One was conducted by the Annenberg Inclusion Initiative, and the other one was conducted by the Norman Lear Center. And what those studies found, and these studies went on over 3 years since the Mental Health Media Guide was launched, we found since those resources were launched, the coalition was formed, we'd seen a massive increase in mental health representation in scripted television, of 40% more mental health themes. Derogatory and stigmatizing language went down by 15%. One of the other pieces of the study was to look at what is the influence on creators themselves. We found overwhelmingly that creators want these resources. They already want to tell these stories. They are telling these stories because for many of them, this is their own lived experience. So there's an appetite in the creative community. And then most importantly, the research looked at what is the actual impact on viewers. Are we having a positive impact on mental health? And the majority of storylines we studied, we looked at specific storylines, showed the viewers had greater knowledge about mental health, reduced stigma, and greater willingness to seek support, therapy, and other types of help seeking. So that was one critical piece in order to make the case within our organization is we know this works. And then beyond that, there's the commercial impact piece. So we, of course, as an entertainment company, are looking at what is our audience like that they're seeing on our airwaves? What are they responding to? What's resonating? And when we do audience research around that, the mental health themes often come up organically as something that the audience is really excited to see and wants to see more of. So one of the shows in that reel is SHOWTIME's The Shy, which has these really powerful mental health storylines around Black men's mental health, specifically showing healing circles. And last season, we saw that content we created around that ended up being among the top performing content of the whole year for that show, the mental health content. Over 1 million views on social. And I just have to read this quote from one of the fans. There's countless quotes like this, but this kind of brings a human element to what the impact is. So someone said, that scene where they had the guys talking about their mental health issues, I really liked that because they touched on Black men and mental health. That was great. I had to pause it, then digest what was happening because they never showed this on television, and it was constructive. I even called my male family member and said, you should watch this episode because it's okay to talk about when you're going through something. And this is just one of many, and of course there's research, of course, behind that as well, but it shows that the storylines are resonating so deeply with fans that they're calling people to talk about what they saw. So from a commercial perspective, that's what we want to see when we create content. We want our audience members to be talking about why a show resonated on a different level with them.
And so I'll add on to that very similarly. For us, for Project Blackbird, the tie-in to impact and policy was very direct. I started with the film, with a short film that was a narrative film based on my own experience, but based on this young woman who I had met at the treatment center. And the reason that I started Project Blackbird Inc., the organization, was because as this young woman, Blackbird, or Kendra Williams is her name, as her and I started to speak with others about our own experience with shame and silence, speaking about mental health, we realized that there were a lot of individuals out there who had experienced the same thing. And somebody actually asked me, why did you create this film? And I thought about it, and I realized that my mission with this film was not just to have it play at a festival, or was not just to have it distributed as a film might normally be distributed, but I really wanted it to touch someone in the audience, to connect with someone in the audience, and to help them realize the importance of connection with others and understanding what lies behind the face of others. Because we walk around and we see people, but we don't know what happened to them this morning. We don't know their childhood. We don't know anything really about them. It's important to want to see each other. So we started Project Blackbird Inc., the organization, to share this message, but to also let others know and to control the narrative around the film that we were presenting, and let others know that it's not just our story, but it's the story of the panelists that we bring on with us. And I'm not sure if the video mentioned, but in our event, we also have a journal prompt that we have our audience fill out on the spot. It's all anonymous, and as they exit the event, they leave that response behind and they take home with them a prior Project Blackbird Inc. participant's journal response. It's all anonymous. And to me, that's one of the most important pieces of the event, because you realize in real time that every single person struggles with something, and that's how I can directly see the impact. We have on our website an archive of hundreds of these responses. We're hitting over 50,000 audience members this year, and at every school that we go to, we have about an 80% click-through rate of resources. So we have a QR code and resources in the back of the room, and the interaction is 80%. That shows me how important mental health is to every individual, and it's resonating. It's important. So for us, impact was another way to share, but also another way to be responsible with the content that we were putting out there.
You mentioned audience engagement, and I think that is not just about the moment that they're watching a film or a show on the screen, but it also speaks to how those narratives are made. And particularly millennials and Gen Z, or Gen Z, I'm not really sure, in Europe, they're interested in making ethical consumer decisions. And so they're interested in how these narratives are being made. And so I was wondering, for both of you having worked in these creative spaces, how do you sort of integrate that holistic approach to not only the final product that you're putting out there, but the entire process to it being made?
I will say, when we think about on-screen representation, we have to think about what's happening behind the camera too. It has to be holistic, because what happens behind the camera then ultimately influences and informs the storytelling you're going to see. So for us, that means the same expertise we bring to our storytellers in terms of the representation, we also bring expert partners to support cast and crew on set, and we're actually piloting new programs this year to continue to beef up those resources. So it's absolutely critical. And the other thing I'll add is, when we think about unscripted and documentary style content, when people are sharing their own mental health story, it is so important to make sure those individuals are ready to share their story. They have resources in place, they're protected. So while we want to see more of these stories, it needs to be done thoughtfully and responsibly. And one of the sections of the Mental Health Media Guide is specifically about that. If you're developing a piece of content where somebody is opening up, how do you put the right safeguards in place to make sure that they're protected? So I just wanted to add that piece, that there's such a need for more of these stories, and there are resources to make sure we're doing it in a way where everybody is safe and taken care of.
And the resources are very, honestly, easily available. We partnered with the JED Foundation. We also partner with NAMI, and both of which were a huge help along the way in making sure that, again, we were responsible with the script that we were creating, that it was accurately representing the experience of somebody going through a mental struggle. And then the representation piece as well, I think, is really important. Who does mental health impact? Everybody. Mental health does not discriminate. And in our world, started out eating disorder focused, we say the same thing. What does an eating disorder look like? Look around the room. It could be anyone. So representation is hugely important.
I think also it's interesting when you look at how things are made. and balancing that with the final sort of product or piece of content. Something that's recently been in the news is Baby Reindeer, which on the one hand, there's a lot of discourse around how it was made, were there proper safeguards in place, not only for, as you say, the real people involved, but also the people auditioning and the crew. But then on the flip side, you have seen demonstrably a rise in men, non-binary trans men, reaching out to sexual assault help charities. So there is a real sort of, I think, drive to learn more about what goes on behind the camera. And it doesn't invalidate the final product, but it is really important in terms of creating something that speaks to authenticity. And I was wondering, we spoke briefly earlier, and we talked about how, when there's financial decision-making taking place, oftentimes people shy away from the idea of implementing safeguards or implementing strategies to protect crew, to protect cast members. So from your points of view, how do you sort of advise people on balancing what they might perceive as a financial, risk?
I mean, I would say, I mentioned JED Foundation as a resource, and I think you're actually getting a huge buy-in when you have a stronger connection with your audience by adding in these real human elements of mental health. I think also when you speak about it afterwards, when you have these conversations, again, you control the narrative around it, so you protect what is being told from being, I guess, misguided. You protect the content that you're putting out there, and we made sure on our end, we knew that we were producing content that could be triggering for some individuals. So how do you help those individuals that might respond negatively to it, or strongly to it, I should say? How do you protect those individuals and just help guide and connect them with resources for afterwards? I think it's just opportunity and not something to be afraid of.
Yeah, and I'll just add, when we started doing our mental health work, it was about 17 years ago, there weren't as many resources and organizations that were really focused on narrative change in mental health. And JED was actually one of the first ones that we started working with as well. And so I will say today, it's actually not that hard. There's this perception that it's going to be a lot of work, it's going to require a lot of investment, and really there's so many fantastic experts, resources like the Media Guide, NAMIs of the world, the JEDs of the world, and oftentimes what is required isn't that dramatic. It's a simple tweak, and the investment is worth it in terms of the returns you get, in terms of audience reactions. And in terms of cast and crew who want to continue working on your production. So I think there's a very strong case to be made for the investment up front really paying off.
When you talked about audience resonating with a piece of content that has strong mental health themes in it, earlier we had spoken a little bit about the various ways in which production companies or filmmakers or TV makers can disseminate their content in a way that resonates with audiences. So you're thinking maybe non-traditionally about how to sort of promote that piece of content that has an impact angle.
I'm not sure if this exactly answers the question, but I want to share a quick story that this reminded me of. We had our event recently at South by Southwest with an NFL panel, 3 male NFL players. Now, our story is about 2 young women at an eating disorder treatment center. You might not think that they have anything to connect with this, but they're sitting in the audience and their mouths are hitting the floor, and they get up to the panel, and one of them says, I think I just watched the entire experience of my sister and my best friend all through that film, and I think I might struggle with something as well. Afterwards, he came up to me, discussed with me what he was going through. So you don't know how what you're presenting is going to affect somebody in the audience, but in real time, I have seen this, this drastic connection unfold. And I apologize if that's not answering the question, but that's what you brought up reminded me of.
Well, I'll add a lot of the content that we work on, as you could see from the video, wouldn't normally be thought of as mental health content. It's just entertainment content that people watch for enjoyment. And being able to go deep on some of these mental health themes and talk about things that aren't typically talked about in mainstream entertainment gives the content a whole new space to be talked about and discussed and explored and lifted up and celebrated as an example. So there's different ways that incorporating mental health themes can kind of extend the reach of the content into new spaces and into new conversations. And I think that's really exciting.
Audiences are very, I think, interested in talking about the things that they're seeing on screen, particularly when they feel reflected in it. And I think, we've had a sort of resurgence of the water cooler moment where you see something on TV or you see a film and you want to talk about it with your friends or your coworkers or your family. And by being able to do that, you illuminate these impact themes, these mental health themes that maybe other people didn't even know. Like, to your point about this, NFL player who all of a sudden was like, oh my gosh, I can connect with this. And I think that speaks to what you're saying about it is entertainment, right? At the end of the day, we're here to make narratives that entertain and make money, and that those things don't have to exclude, and often don't exclude, mental health angles. But I wanted to talk briefly with you about sort of what you see as the next step, the next phase, professionally, but also in sort of the industry in terms of developing projects that have a mental health impact angle specifically.
A few things on that one. One, I have noticed the brilliance of unique streaming platforms coming to the table where you are able to kind of host a watch party. And I think that's a brilliant space to, again, be responsible with the narrative that you're presenting, to have a conversation around it. It's not just the film, but let's take it further. Let's talk about that film. Let's have a conversation, like both of our videos mentioned. So I think that's something fun and important that I'm seeing on the rise. For us, for Project Blackbird, we are impact-based, so we're taking our event to 50 college campuses in the fall. We're partnered with NAMI and Maybelline through their Brave Together program to really help bring resources to these different universities and students. We're also involved in policy change with a briefing, so using it in that method. And then we're creating the feature film of the short film that we take around Ed, and working actively with partners like Jed. And it is a very seamless experience to work with them. I have no ties, I'm not trying to plug them, but they really are wonderful. So that's what's next for us. We just want to continue to make impact, real impact, connect with every individual. And I want to continue to connect every individual to each other. All of those journal responses, I read them. They're people that I kind of bring with me through my journey, and the mission is really important. So that's our future.
For me, I think a couple things are hopefully in the near future. One is more research. I feel like there's still an opportunity, going back to your earlier question, to really quantify the business impact of these storylines. How much are they engaging and generating new viewers? And I think in my heart, I know that these stories are making that impact, but I think having hard data to really quantify that would be really beneficial. So that's something we're exploring. And then the second piece is really ensuring that our storytellers that are part of the broader coalition have the tools that they need to tell the stories they want to tell. So recently, one of our sister Paramount shows called Young and the Restless wanted to tell a story about a child experiencing OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. And so we actually created a new section of the mental health media guide that just launched about a week ago on portraying children's mental health, which when you're talking about mental health, it's not one size fits all. It's so important to be really specific based on the community and topic you're talking about. And So we really want to make sure storytellers have that level of guidance. So we launched that recently. We're in a beta phase of launching a guide specifically for digital storytelling with the JED Foundation and the Annenberg Inclusion Initiative, because as we know, a lot of young people in particular are getting their content from online sources. So how can we bring these same best practices into those spaces? And thirdly, we are later this year going to launch an international expansion of the mental health media guide. So content creators outside the US can get many of those resources in a more relevant manner. Of course, mental health is universal, but and many of the storytelling guidelines absolutely translate. But we want to make sure we're building things that are bespoke to the creators who are looking for more best practices. So hopefully we'll see more wonderful, impactful mental health stories.
Absolutely. I'm going to throw it out to the audience now. If there's anyone who has any questions for our illustrious panel members. Right here, we've got someone in the front.
Hi, I'm Katie from Fair Play Films. I'm really interested in the production of the mental health in media guide, and how are you bringing audiences and people into the design of that, and particularly because I've got a background in projects like that with young people in mental health in the UK, so I'm really interested to know how their voices are coming into the design of the pack.
Yeah, sure. So the guide was launched in 2021, but it's a living, breathing resource that's continuing to evolve to meet the needs of its users. So as I mentioned, there's a coalition of 70 organizations that helped build it, and many are mental health experts, academics, clinicians, young people, people with lived experience who are constantly informing and helping us ensure the guide is serving its needs. So it is truly a project of a collective. It's not one organization or one individual's voice. It is meant to speak to all the different stakeholders who want to tell these stories. And I actually think we have a QR code. If we can get the MTV QR code, you can take a look at it and share feedback, because it really is only as good as how useful it is to the people looking for this type of guidance. And I should mention this guide now lives permanently at the USC Annenberg Inclusion Initiative. So they are the long-term home, and I'd be happy to share any feedback anybody has with them.
Any other questions? I thought I saw one. Yeah, right here in the green dress in the front.
Hi, I found it very insightful. Thank you so much. I'm working on a project right now that has mental health as main theme, and especially within women that suffer trauma. And I am actually with like this question. Sorry for being so direct, but what is the best way to get funding for this kind of projects? Because there is so much taboo around this, and every time that I do the pitch for like several industries and producers, so now I have one that's helping me here now with that. But from your perspective, how is it like to fundraise and to make like these projects come to life?
Well, it'd be better for you.
I can say, for one, the nonprofit that I started was never really an intention. That nonprofit was never started with the intention of fundraising for a film, but there has been a lot of tie-in. Our nonprofit is helping to fund the feature film that we're going to then use for the tour. But there have been a lot of companies and organizations that really, really care about this, Maybelline being one of them, different banks, law firms that really care about mental health as a value of their institution, of their company and organization. So that was kind of the initial funding. And I will say there are a lot of individuals that in kind really do want to invest, donate. They want these stories to be told. And as we bring our short film around on tour and individuals see the impact that it's having on the audience members, and it's a real impact. I mean, people are, I say it lightly, and it's financing and it's fun, but these are people's lives, people's daughters' lives, people's sons' lives, best friends' lives that are being flipped upside down. That they're miserable. I mean, nobody asks to struggle with mental health, but so many do, and I think this resonates with so many individuals that when you're vocal about what you're doing, I think there are a lot of people that will step up to the plate and be those initial investors too.
Thank you.
I come at this from a slightly different vantage point sitting within Paramount, but for us, like when we try to speak to our creative partners, it's really pointing to examples of where it's been super successful. And there's a lot. There's a lot of, for us, we obviously focus more on television, but there's television and films that have mental health themes that have been hugely successful. And again, if you look at audience data, you can see that's one of the reasons why. So we just try to leverage those as case studies of like, this is something that will ultimately really resonate with viewers and be commercially successful. And hopefully one day we will have more research on the commercial impact to share with this group to continue to make that argument.
I will also add to that quickly. I think that there are a lot of players that want to attach themselves to a film around mental health, whether it's a director or an actor, but there are so many individuals that care about this theme that could be an interesting avenue for you to kind of start with to get the excitement from investors.
Thank you.
I think we have time for one more question. If there's a chap right there.
Hey, so you just mentioned some great case studies of shows or movies that have done a really good job. I'm curious if you'd be willing to share some of your favorite case studies.
Ooh.
Both of
you. I have to obviously talk about our Paramount shows because they're some of my favorite, but one really great example, which is so unexpected, is a show called Clone High, which was developed at MTV Entertainment Studios, and we distributed on Max. So if you have Max, you can check it out. But it's an animated comedy that's silly and funny and irreverent and not at all the kind of place you would expect to see a really awesome storyline about anxiety and like what does it look like and how does it manifest. And the reason I bring that up is because sometimes when we started this work a few years ago, people would say, oh, well, I work in this format, this doesn't apply to me, that's for the unscripted department or what have you. And actually, it applies to every format. And if you can find ways in an animated comedy to make the topic of anxiety relatable, you can truly do it anywhere. So that's the one that I really love because it's kind of sometimes the last place you would expect to find awesome mental health representation.
All right. I think we're going to close it out there. I want to thank my panelists for their amazing insights and all of you for your participation. Thank you so much.